pain doesn't have to be
Mm.
suffering, but we turn pain into suffering when we don't treat the pain. When we go and we say, hey, we're going to ignore it, we're going to avoid it, and the pain just keeps coming back because the situation is going to repeat itself, right? The world is going to repeat itself because you haven't learned how to deal with the situation, right? And dealing with it can mean like, hey, learning more about what that situation is about, right? Why am I thinking this way? And then also going into the perspective of saying like, hey, you know what? I can actually do something different, right? So welcome to the Level Up With Us podcast, where we share about perspective shifts that we've had in different situations in our lives. So that hopefully when you come across these situations, you don't have to feel so helpless because you can see that there might be another way to see the situation. And as we all know, your perspective is reality and how it can help you overcome the challenges that you face and see that there might be a way out. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Today, you can notice that we're actually not inside our studio at Our Family Without Borders. Instead, we're actually doing a remote online version where we're bringing on guests from around the world, from our community, over 150 plus countries, to come on and talk about their perspective shifts with you and share about their experiences. Today, we have an amazing member of the community, Jessica, who's joining us today to share about her experience leveling up and having a dramatic perspective change on her relationship with herself. So, Jessica, could you please introduce yourself a bit to the audience, a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what does relationship with self mean to you?
Thank you, Conrad. I'm excited to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica. I'm currently pursuing my PhD, so I'm a student, and I am from Canada. And I think my relationship with myself has changed over the years for sure, especially within this last year.
Yeah. And I guess, like, what does it mean for you, like, relationship with self? Like, what does that concept mean?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's more than one definition. For me, it's more related to self-esteem and self-confidence and really how am I treating myself? How do I talk to myself? And like, what's the type of dialogue that I have with myself? I don't know. Is it the same for you or something a bit different?
I think like when I think about relationship with self, like I think about like, relationship with anyone, right? Like, so I see myself as like an independent entity, right? There's my conscious mind, right? That does the things and is talking to you now, but there's also the unconscious that's working all the time in overdrive, probably, right? And I think when you are communicating with yourself, when you're talking to yourself more often and you're actually having a dialogue and actually having a relationship, so to speak, right? That's when you actually get to know each other. That's when you know what your wants are. Where do you want to go in life? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? And just really trying to understand yourself to a deeper level so that you're not surprised by, your subconscious brain trying to do something that maybe your conscious knows that isn't right or you don't want to do, right? And not just recognizing and understanding, but also loving that behavior. And I think that's a big part of, like you said, the dialogue with self, right? Where you have an aggressive way to approach yourself, right? Oh, you suck, you're not doing the things I want you to do. Or do you love it and say, hey, how come you're doing it this way? So I am curious though, how has your, perspective on that changed? Because like you said, this year seems like it's been a very, very turbulent year for you.
Yeah, I think my relationship with myself in the past, when I was younger, it was very much surface level. Like my relationship with myself in the past, it wasn't bad per se. I was like, hey, Jess, you can do it. Like, don't worry. Just pick yourself up. Like, you're doing well. You're doing great. But it wasn't until recently that I realized a lot of that self-esteem that I had was related to external validation. So I was like, okay, I'm confident or like I am doing well because I am a good student. I am doing all these extracurricular activities. I have this position in this school club. But it wasn't until this year when all of that external validation kind of just like exploded, disappeared. Like there was no more that I realized that my relationship with myself wasn't that great because then I started feeling very insecure and just kind of feeling like oh, hey, like I'm not that good. Like I'm not really good enough for this. So I think it definitely changed. And now I've
Mm,
realized that, at least for me, I need to start building it from within. And that's a different kind of self-esteem, I do think.
wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jessica. And I think actually that's super powerful. And just to recap a little bit, right? It seems like, you know, as we kind of evolve, as we kind of level up in life, I think the way that we deal with ourselves, our internal self, changes. And what it seems to me is that you've had this experience where in your past, the relationship with your internal self was very much supplemented by having all these external validators, right? Being in this specific position, right? Doing these specific things. Those are the things that gave your inner self, um, I guess the relationship made it stronger. Or it's like, oh yeah, I think I know what's going on with my inner self. I think everything's going well because all these things are going good in my life, right? I feel like I belong. I feel like I'm getting things done. I feel like life is going the way I want it. So therefore, my inner self must be appeased. But I think
Mm-hmm.
when we actually lose those, you know, indicators, like we said, right? I think that's when we start realizing that, hey, maybe our inner self isn't as happy as we thought it was, right? Maybe it isn't as, satisfied and as stable.
Mm-hmm. But I wonder for myself if I needed to go through that experience of getting my own self confidence from an external source first
Hmm.
to kind of get to where I am today
Oh,
and
yeah.
then realize that, hey, maybe it's not enough. Like maybe there's something else I need to build and that's within myself. I don't know. Is the experience
Absolutely.
same for you? Uh,
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Because I think like what we all initially go towards, right, is how can others, make us feel good, right? Like we tend to think about ourself as a reflection of the world. If the world is doing something, then we react to that. And then our feelings depend on what's happening, the environment, right? Oh, it's a rainy day. I feel sad, right? Or someone treated me this way and I
mm-hmm.
feel that a certain way. So there is always some expectation that we need an external thing to make us feel a certain way. And I think what you're talking about is, you know, that's the experience that you actually need before you can go ahead and realize that, hey, why am I going through all these different steps, right? Because eventually what we do is like we try to influence others so that they can act a certain way to us so that we can feel good. But how come we can't just skip that middleman and, talk to ourselves directly? And I think that is like a really
Mm-hmm.
profound and powerful way to see the world.
Yeah, but I also wonder if it has to do with upbringing as well. Like, what if I was able to talk to myself when I was younger and would I still have the same realizations I have today? Would I not? Like, is it something that everybody has to go through where you need some external validation first to
Mhm.
like pad up your self esteem and then you can build your own?
Well, like, do you think it's about padding up your self esteem? Like, because actually, I don't think actually that's the
Mm.
case. Like, I'm not certain that like you actually got the self esteem that you needed from other people, right? And I think maybe
Okay,
better to
sure.
define
Maybe
self
not
esteem.
padding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Self esteem for me is feeling reassured in yourself
Hmm.
and kind of knowing where you want to go and prioritizing what you need and
Hmm.
what you want at that moment, or maybe in the future as well. And I think it's not saying that you won't feel insecure at times, but I think it's knowing how to talk yourself through those moments of insecurity and then helping
Mm.
yourself build that confidence back up.
Sure, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
And then so I think then from your perspective is you have to figure out and go through that experience, right? And I believe it by the way, right? I think absolutely we need to be empathetic, first of all, is that there are I think the path to getting to like, oh, I know myself and I'm gonna have a direct dialogue with myself doesn't come easily. 100% doesn't come easily. It comes with a lot of pain,
Mm,
a lot of expectations, right? And a lot of
mm,
expectations lost, right? Unmet because We
Yeah.
wanted a certain kind of validation from the outside world. We want a certain kind of response. We expected something, right? And we didn't get that. And that's a
Mm.
painful experience. Like that's absolutely painful. And, and I think that's when we start looking within. And I do agree with you. And I think that's like a very like mandatory part of it. But I think where I'm just very interested is that I don't necessarily think it was a function of, oh, you have built up a certain type of self-esteem from, the other, right? The otherish kind of influence. Because to me, at least, when you build up self-esteem, like, and it's a stable one, then it's built up like it's a foundation, right? Then you build up more things.
Mm.
But the way I see it is, at
Mhm.
least when I was very like, insecure and I needed external validation a lot, right? To make me feel good. Every time I didn't get it,
Mm.
oh my God, everything felt so bad. Right. The moment someone didn't say thank you for
Yeah.
something, the moment that, someone didn't appreciate something that I already know they appreciated, they said it like 20 times before, but the moment they don't say it once,
Mhm.
twice, three times, you start questioning everything. You're like, oh no, did I not do good enough? Am I not good enough? And you go into like the
Mhm.
whole self blame, part of it. And I'm curious, like, if that's something that
Mm.
you might resonate with.
Yeah, for sure. I think when I noticed that I lost my self-esteem, it was because I realized that I wasn't happy with any of the interactions around me. Like whether it was with my family, my coworkers, or with my friends. I just noticed that, hey, all these interactions, I'm not getting what I want. Like, do they not like me? Like, why are
Mm,
they not treating me the way I want to be appreciated? Like, I do so much for all of them, but where's my appreciation? But
mm,
then I kind of realized that, well, the problem is me. Like, if all in all of these interactions, if they're all bad, and statistically that is not possible, then
mm,
the common factor there is me. So then if it's me, then I guess I'm the one who has to change and I need to understand myself first before I can, improve my interactions with them.
mm. I love that. And actually, I think you've described something that is also very um, amazing because I think what we talk about in the community quite a bit is, the four A's of understanding, right? I think what you've done here is that you've actually understood your situation to a very high degree because you went through all the stages. I think at the beginning, right, we all go through avoidance, right? We're like, hey, there's
Yeah.
this really bad feeling. It must be them, right? They must be the problem. We start blaming
Mhm.
outwardly or even blaming ourselves maybe at that moment too, but it's all about blame. It's like it's an unwillingness to take responsibility, but it's because we're reacting out of pain. And that's okay, right? I think that's a very normal way. That's how we
Yeah.
first react to everything. We want to
Right.
avoid it, right? And
Mm.
again, if you think about the primal responses, right? It's either fight, flight, or
Mm.
freeze, right? And then those are the things that we
Mm.
do. And I think what I love is that you've then moved towards like awareness. Okay, I feel this certain way, right? And I feel this certain way, and I don't want to feel this way, right? But I do feel it, right? And it's okay to feel this way. And really just moving into like, okay, these are the feelings I have. And I think having a feelings wheel is super helpful here, right? To like really identify the
Mm.
core feelings that we're going through, right? And being specific about that. Because I think when we're avoiding it, we don't want to label our feelings. But I think it's better when we're able to label it and then we're actually able to confront it, right? And treat it with kindness. Then the next step, right, is that you go towards, acceptance, right? And acceptance is where you start looking into like, well, you know, every situation looks like, it's not being, the way that I want, right? It's not, the most ideal kind of interactions I would like. I'm not getting what I want. I don't feel, treated the way I want
Mhm.
to be treated. And therefore you start really analyzing like, how did we get here? Right. And I think that's like a great step towards like accepting the situation where it's like, hey, I'm the problem, right? It's me. And it's not really from a blame
Yeah.
perspective, but from a responsibility perspective, right? Because when you're taking that decision and you're saying, hey, I'm the problem, then you can also be the solution, which is the action step next. And I think what's really amazing about this is that that's actually the stages that we see in everybody. Those are the four stages, right, of understanding a situation, right? We all have to go through that. And I think you have to love that experience because, you know, it's often that we will have to process things this way, and it's not going to be an immediate jump. It's very hard to jump straight to action, right? Because if we're still feeling very
For sure.
unsafe, we're feeling very unheard, there's no way we're jumping all the way there, right? So
Yeah.
I'm curious how you think about that breakdown, I think, of your situation. And then also, like, what kind of action steps did you take, now that you realized that and you
Yeah,
accepted that situation?
for sure. I think for me, that's very much what I went through. I think, like I mentioned earlier, I had this sense of self esteem that was, now I look at it as it's very easily breakable. Like my younger self was very arrogant, not outwardly, but inside I was like, hey, I'm
Mm,
doing well. It's okay. Like I can kind of move forward with no problem. But it wasn't until like with all of those interactions and they weren't going the way I wanted and my ego shattered where I realized, oh, hey, like my self esteem isn't so grounded. It isn't so strong that I can
mm,
handle all of this. And I think when I realized that, it was like, oh, okay, it's me. There's something about what like I needed to do to
mm,
change this. And I think maybe that's what was required for me to kind of progress through this is that my ego needed to be shattered for me to realize that, hey, that self esteem I had was probably a veneer and it wasn't like solid. So then
mm,
that's where I kind of moved on to, okay, what next can I do? And I think that kind of will answer your question of what actions I took. I think for me, I realized that I was ruminating a lot. I was thinking a lot inside my head. So then I actually went to my first therapy session. And then I realized that I needed to be more kind to myself. I needed to be considerate for myself, like I would do for other people, and kind of just ask myself, hey, what do I need in this situation? What do I want? And
mm,
then the other thing, so then that made me more aware in each situation, like, is this making me happy? Is this what I really want? To then kind of, I guess ask for and get the things I want. So I feel, not so incapable and incompetent. And then the other thing was kind of reaching out maybe to others. But for me, it was reaching out to different source material so that I can get new learnings and new concepts that I probably didn't think about before. So like I was on YouTube and I actually watched this video to kind of understand why I was thinking that way. And then it was really like, and then I think that's when it kind of clicked for me that I had a negativity bias at that time. So
mm,
any interaction I had with anybody would just be negative because my brain was kind of geared towards the negative. So that means that for any ambiguous situation, like if I walked into the pantry and my colleague didn't say hi to me, I would think, oh my God, do they not like me? Did I do something wrong?
mm,
Like, what did I do? But
mm,
we don't know. Maybe they were busy thinking about something. Maybe they're rushing off somewhere else. We
right.
don't know. And then the third realization I had was I also tended to overgeneralize a lot. So I would think, oh, I suck at this. Like I'm not really close with anybody anymore. I can't do my PhD work well. But that's not true. Like, not everything is bad, right? There are certain skills I don't have yet. There are certain relationships with my like friends and colleagues I haven't built yet, but it doesn't mean that they won't improve from there. So I think
Mm,
for me, it was really getting out of my own headspace, trying to find new perspectives of looking at things that kind of like shook me out of like the mindset that I was in. And I don't know,
mhm.
was it the same for you? Like what kind of actions were you able to take to kind of build your self-esteem?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing that, Jessica. And I think that's actually really powerful. And just to recap, I think, when you went through this pain, right? Again, it's always pain. I think, like, of your ego shattering, right? And I think that might be different for everybody. I think like that, whatever pain you might be
Yeah.
going through might be like a little bit different, but there's always going to be pain involved in this situation, right? It's like, hey, my expectation of what was supposed to happen didn't happen, and that shattered my, in this your case, your ego, right? In my case, I think it shattered my perception of what I thought was, what I was doing right. And I guess you can call it ego in a way, but like I thought, hey, I was doing this thing right. I built all these systems, to kind of organize my life in a certain way. And then I see that my life isn't panning out the way I wanted. So I don't have as much control as I thought I did, right? Over the things that I was trying to do. And then that basically made me go like, hey, you know what? I need to, reflect more on this. And if this is the same cycle that happens again and again and again, which is another indicator, right? That, we're in like a pain suffering loop, I call it. Like pain doesn't have to be
Mm.
suffering, but we turn pain into suffering when we don't treat the pain. When we go and we say, hey, we're going to ignore it, we're going to avoid it, and the pain just keeps coming back because the situation is going to repeat itself, right? The world is going to repeat itself because you haven't learned how to deal with the situation, right? And dealing with it can mean like, hey, learning more about what that situation is about, right? Why am I thinking this way? And then also going into the perspective of saying like, hey, you know what? I can actually do something different, right? I can actually think the world in a different way, and I can change my perspective. I can do something about that, and I think that's incredibly empowering. And I think that's also for me too. Is like when I realized that hey, I had so many things that I can do to change my own perspective of the situation. Where hey, not everyone's my enemy, right? Not everyone's out to get me, right? And maybe there's something I can do, right, to reframe myself that like hey, things are good, right? Things objectively are good. And I think that's like a really beautiful thing that we can do in this world is that, you can look at anything, like literally you can look at a candy wrapper, right? You can be like, hey, it's shining like really beautifully off the light, right? And it looks amazing, right? There's like, reflections and then you taste it and like, wow, like this tastes great. Like there's so many things in this world that are worth appreciating and worth, just
Yeah.
if you just tweak the way that you look at it, things can be so beautiful. Things are so beautiful, right? And again, I say that with the greatest amount of empathy is that, hey, when things suck, things going to feel like it really sucks, right? The world feels like it's,
Mhm.
over and everything is, in chaos and nothing's going right. Absolutely. And we all feel that way, 100%. And all I'm just urging is that when we have the chance, right, and just follow these steps, right, is that, hey, put ourselves in a safe space, right? So we don't avoid the situation as much as we would like to, right? We feel safe, so we don't need to avoid it, right? Go into a place where you can start talking about your feelings, right? And I love that you went to therapy. Therapy is a great place for that, right? And really talking to someone that actually wants to listen, right? And their whole job there is to listen. Because I think when you talk to your friends, when you talk to your family members, your partners, like they may not actually have the mental capacity to listen to your problems, right? Because they have their own things to deal with and we're all
Mhm.
human. But having someone there, like literally
Mhm.
just paid there to sit there and listen to you, I think that gives you like a very bigger opportunity to share your feelings, right? So that you can finally, move towards a feeling of acceptance, right? I was like, okay, now I'm ready to talk about how we
Mhm.
got here. I'm ready to take responsibility of what's going on. I'm not avoiding the pain anymore, right? I don't want to turn this pain into suffering, and I'm
Yeah.
going to do something about it. And I think that is like just the crux of the most powerful way of, I think, building up your relationship with yourself. Because if you keep avoiding yourself and you keep,
Yeah.
you know, distancing yourself from the pain that you're going through and plugging in that pain with like short-term gratifications, like I don't know, like I used to like just read manga every time I felt sad, right? Or stay in bed if I feel bad about myself, right? There's a lot of ways that you might
Mhm.
approach these problems in your life.
Mhm.
And again, it's okay to do that
Yeah.
initially, but for how long, right?
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. And I think it's really important that you brought up empathy as well. I think during this whole process, I realized that even though I had the realizations I had and I recognized that, oh, hey, like there's this part of my self esteem that I want to work on. I think it's also really important to understand that it's not always 100%. Like
Mm,
in 7 days of the week, I won't always feel like, hey, I have my self esteem, like I'm internally like validated and I can do everything.
of
There
course.
are like 20% of the week or even more than 20% of the week where I feel like, oh, like things are not working great. And maybe I fall back into the previous mindsets I have. But I think it's like recognizing that, hey, it's okay if I fall back into it, but how do I pick myself back up? Like, how do I create my safe space? And I'm really interested to know, how do you create safe space for yourself so you can kind of bring yourself back out of that situation and work towards who you want to be?
Yeah, I think that's like a wonderful question, because I think that's also changed very much over time. Like, I don't know if you guys have had this experience before, right? And this is for the audience as well. Like, I think this is so cool is that in the past, I always thought the path to a safe space was if people talk to me like the exact right way. Like syntax. It's like, oh, I don't feel safe because you said these words in this exact sequence, right? And I feel attacked. So therefore I don't feel safe. Like if you guys had that experience, just let us know in the comments because that's so relevant for me. In that I would always feel like, hey, if only someone worded their words a bit differently, then I would feel safe. My feeling of safeness was entirely focused on what was happening outside. And for a long time, like that's what I thought safe spaces were, right? It's like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna have to create, a meditative space for myself. I gotta lock myself up in my room, right? When I was a child, and I was like, hey, I need to feel safe, right? I need to make a, a pillow fort, right? And dive into the covers and just hibernate in there. Like, there's a lot of things I thought my environment needed to keep me safe, right? And it was really in the last few years that I started realizing that safe spaces can be created within, right? As long as I feel mentally safe, right, then safety can really manifest. And of course, I'm not saying like, hey, yes, let's say like a tiger is actually in front of you and they're trying to bite you and like, yeah, I'm just going to go into my mental safe space, and not do anything. Like, of course not, right? Physically be safe as well. But the thing is, like, most of us in developed nations are safe, right? We have shelter, we have food, right? For the most part, we are safe. So a lot of the unsafeness that we feel is very much like our brain, the primal part of our brain just really kicking in, and the stress that we feel translates into like the stress that we think we should be reacting to in such a violent way, which is overall unhealthy for us, right? If you think about it, there's if we react that way, then we feel anxious, we feel sad, we feel depressed. Like these are a lot of things that aren't really serving us in our current day to day. So what I've realized that I need to implement was, how do I make myself safe? And that starts with asking questions, right? It's like, hey, do you feel safe? Right? What's going on? Are you out of the situation already? What's the worst that can happen here? And I think really like thinking about like, what's the worst case scenarios, right? And is that happening right now? Am I dying? Right? And then like realizing that, hey, I'm not, right? It's not ideal. Just to be clear, the situation is never ideal, but it's not as bad, right? I'm not everything's, hopeless. And I think that gives me like safety in that it's not the worst case scenario. It's not the world isn't falling, sky is still up, right? Like everything is still okay. And I think that's actually a bit different too, because I think something that my dad and he always taught me when I was younger to focus on what's the worst case scenario, right, in any situation, so that you can actually go ahead and process that and know that, hey, if I can deal with the worst case scenario, the scenario right now in front of me is okay as well. I can deal with it also. But what I thought was really interesting was that the way that he talked about it and the way that I ended up utilizing it for a lot of my life until I think very recently was, hey, everything is worst case scenario, right? Like, cause that's the way he usually ended up, interpreting it and then like implementing it. It's like everything is potentially the worst case scenario. And then it seems like, at least to me, like a reaction to all those things that like is placed on the highest alert. And I thought for me, like that was very stressful, right? Seeing the whole world as like potentially the worst case scenario, right? Like, and seeing the whole world as like, so fragile, right? There's like everything's so close to destruction. So what I do now instead, I think, is I say, hey, you know what? This isn't the worst case, right? And that's okay. And so whatever this is, it's all good. We can handle it. And so I think that's given me a lot more peace when dealing with those kind of situations. Yeah.
That's good. I think that's a great way to think about it. And I think it also prevents you from overthinking it and kind of building up a bigger barrier for yourself to kind of go. kind of interact with. So I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, no, I think like in general, there's so many ways to see the world, right? As you know, like we tend to think of the world as just, you know, one like static thing, but the thing is that it's ever changing, and not just the world ever changing, you also ever change, you also change like constantly, right? The perspective in which we see the world and the things that we care about and the things that we want to emphasize that may or may not necessarily, change our perception, which then changes our reality. So let me give you an example, right? Like, so we start off the world by saying, hey, I want to just survive. I just want to, be able to get the food I need, relieve myself. Those are the things I need to do. And that's all I'm focused on. So therefore, anything that challenges that specific thing in that moment is really worth thinking about. It's like, hey, I need to survive. If I don't get food, I'm going to die. So that matters to me very much. That is life or death, 100%, right? And then when you go to the next stage of like, hey, I'm independency, right? I want to survive, but I can't do it by myself. I need someone to take care of me. I have caretakers, right? My parents and whatnot. Then if I don't get their love, then that's, a really big thing for me. That's life or death to me, right? And I need to make sure that I'm able to influence them and get the love that I want from them. And then the next step after that is, okay, now once I got that, which is like, well, now I want to win in the world, right? I want to achieve my wants. And if I don't get what I want from the world, if I don't get the transactions that they don't give me the things I want from, the situations that I'm placing my trust into, my effort into, and if I don't get the same return that I want, well, then that's life or death to me, right? So you can notice that at every single stage, life or death is different, right? And I don't think that's necessarily overthinking. I want to just be clear. Like, I think what I'm trying to do with the Better Life Framework, why it's so important to me is that it's actually helping you predict, right? What is going to be the thing that's actually valuable for you to care about, right? There's infinite things to care about, right? But what is the actual thing that you should be caring about and tackling depending on the perspective that you're in? So continuing the analogy, right? Like then if you're in belonging, hey, if I don't feel like I belong in a group, if I don't feel like I have purpose in my life, that really sucks. And that's life or death, right? So then that's where you focus it. And then if your perspective is on systems, right? Is like, hey, I want all these systems to work together. And if they don't work together, then that's life or death, right? Like, hey, I built the system. Why is it not working? Why is my life not panning out the way that it should, right? That's life or death. And then you say, hey, I want to let go. I just want to go within myself and introspect and understand myself better, right? And, love myself. And if you can't love yourself, that's life or death, right? And then after you have, loved yourself and you understand who you are and you want to set boundaries, and that's super important to you. If you can't set boundaries, like that's life or death. And then you move towards being curious, right? Like, hey, I want to be curious now because people are going to cross my boundaries anyways. So how can I be curious? And that's life or death. Like if I don't understand this person, if I don't like dig it deep into like intellectual curiosity and just truly like appreciate what they are thinking about and try to understand what they're like, why they work this way, like how come they're so motivated and so driven to like, cross their boundaries, like that's life or death, right? And then finally, if I can't love everyone in the world, if I can't have true empathy, if I can't, just accept everyone as they are, then that's life or death. So I think like when we talk about overthinking, I just really want to be clear is that like the only thing that we want to do here is to really empathize with you and say, hey, everything seems important in that moment. Everything does, right? The world is a scary place. And the world can seem frightening. The world can seem dark. The world can seem mean. It might not give you everything that you want. Things will always pan out, right? The way you want it to. But knowing where your perspective lies and knowing the ways that you can deal with the situation, right? How do you take yourself from avoidance to awareness, to acceptance, and then to action? I think are the things that we're trying to share here in our community, in the Coax3 Family Foundation. And I think just nice also, like, we are supported by the foundation. If you check up on our websites, we have a ton of philosophies that we all strive to embody in our lives and we all strive to think about all the time, really help us, make life easier, help us live a better life, right? Help us process things in a way that is healthy for us, that helps us really achieve the things that we want, right? And learn how to understand ourselves a lot better and others, right? So we can have the empathy and the kindness to really, reflect within and, look at the situation and really just transform our perspective.
Sometimes you're just not sure how to think of a situation. But if there's maybe a guide there, then you're like, okay, this could be what it is. And then it starts to make a lot more sense.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's the purpose of these podcasts as well, right? To bring on amazing people like yourself who have had these transformative perspective shifts, right? In this case, relationship with yourself, to really identify and say, hey, like, there's another way to see this, right? Another way to see this topic, this situation, so that we don't have to feel so helpless. We don't have to feel like this is something that's, we can't overcome, right? That there isn't any other way to see this, like that this is the reality and full stop, nothing else, right? So I think if you guys are interested in checking it out, it's all for free, right? Check it out on the website at xstreet.family, or you can click on the link in the description below. And definitely really excited to share more with you guys. And it's constantly being updated. It's a community effort to really build as much knowledge as we can, right? To help you level up, right? And then to give you the tools to take action on your learning, and hopefully a community to help you never struggle alone. So that's again, x3.family, and back to the episode. So Jessica, I think, do you have any thoughts for anybody who might be in your shoes, that we're going through what you were going through maybe just a few months to a year ago? And what do you think that they need to hear right now to help them tackle the challenges that they have ahead of them?
That's a really good question. I think during the process, I think it really helped when I tell myself, and also like other people around me, if I hear like, hey, it's okay, you're doing great, I'm here for you. I think that was really supportive for me. And I think the other thing I kind of realized was, um, I just needed to reach out and kind of talk to friends and family who I know care about me, because I think one of the biggest things I realized was self isolation is my own protection mechanism, but that didn't actually make things better for me. So I think it's realizing that, hey, in my head, I may feel like other people don't want to talk to me, but let me just go and try and reach out to them and see. And I think 100% of the time I realized that, hey, this was what I was thinking, but my relationship with these friends and family, like, it was still just as good as they were before, if not better, because I went to them and was like, hey, this is what I'm feeling right now, and I think I just need some support. And they were more than happy to give it.
I think that's lovely. And I think that really talks about, it's so interesting, because I think this also highlights something that we talked about in the episode earlier very well, is that when we're in the avoidance mode, not only are we assigning blame, right, to everything around us, up and to ourselves, but that also makes us drive away the people that could be coming to support us, right? We don't see them as people that could be helping us. We see them as perhaps even enemies, right? Or at least we feel maybe even sometimes ashamed to go to them and say, hey, I need help. So when we actually start approaching the problem or the challenges that we have with a feeling of acceptance, like, hey, this is how it is, right? I process my feelings. My feelings are like this, and this is the situation. And now we say, hey, what can I do about it? And we're here with you, right? Everyone is here with you. The community is here to support you, right? And I think if you are going through this, you are developing this relationship with yourself, you're not alone. And we've all went through this. And hopefully, with the things that we shared here today, you can go through it better as well, and with a fuller heart and with more hope in your mind. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us today. It's really lovely
Thanks for
having you
having
on. And
me.
if you liked having her on as well, we will be co-hosting for the next few episodes as we talk to more community members around the world, really doing our world tour and really just exploring all the different perspectives that everyone is thinking about across our community, over 150 plus countries. And I look forward to chatting with you guys soon. Please take care. See you next week. Bye-bye.